Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Our guest this morning will be Sheriff Jim Allard a little bit later on. Obviously, we will be talking about the debate. We all stayed up a little too late watching the debate. But you know what I learned today before we get into the exact numbers? There's a PTO management software company called Flamingo. And they did the research on this because why not? Do you know today, August the 24th, is the most popular day of the year for employees to call out sick? So if you watched the debate, you stayed up late, you said, maybe today, towards the end of summer, we're going to take a day off. It's even more popular to take August 24th off than it is the day after the Super Bowl. Not really sure the reasoning why, but maybe, hey, again, if you stayed up late watching the debate, not a bad option for you. Let's take a look. Oh, first, contact information. So if you have any questions for the sheriff, and I definitely want you, if you don't mind, to weigh in on who you thought the winner of last night's debate was. I have various pundits that we'll get to throughout the morning, and it's really all over the board. Now, according to Drudge Report, and it's early on, but they do where you can vote. You can go online and vote. And they actually, as of right now, 32% thought it was Ramaswamy. Coming in second, and I've heard a lot of people speak very highly of Nikki Haley's performance last night, 20%. Christie, 19%. DeSantis, 18%. And then Pence at 4%, which is surprising. It is a Drudge Report, keep it in mind. But Pence had, well, let's take a look at it. Pence had, according to CNN, the most speaking time, and according to this poll, again, it's not scientific, it's a Drudge Report. They've had 87,000 people vote on it. But Mike Pence getting the most speaking time last night. I thought, personally, with Pence and Christie, of course, which we'll talk about, but Pence got, I don't know, it was the talking down to Ramaswamy was interesting. But Ramaswamy, many have said, came off looking kind of like a smart aleck. So that's why I'm really hoping that you'll weigh in. But that's the look at the time. Pence got 12 minutes, 26 seconds. Ramaswamy, second. Hey, that's good. First time out. I read a really fascinating piece yesterday about Ramaswamy. I can't remember who did it now. I wish I could give credit to who came out with it. But he's doing sometimes 30 interviews a day. His work ethic is really remarkable to get his name out there. I mean, going on 2-hour podcasts, but also doing quick radio station call-ins. 30 in a day, spending sometimes 8-9 hours just on interviews. So it was no surprise that he could handle himself last night with 11 minutes, 38 seconds. Christie, 11 minutes, 37 seconds. So that's a close one. DeSantis at just 10 minutes, 1 second, and you see the rest there. Tim Scott... I thought Tim Scott came off as who he is, likable, a nice guy. Some have said happy warrior. And I would say that is the case. I don't know if that helps him in the polls necessarily, but I don't think he did any damage to himself. I'm not sure if anybody really did much damage for themselves unless you didn't like someone's attitude. I thought Chris Christie came off. I know people say it's his style, and that's what makes him a great debater. I've heard people say that. That whole idea of like, I've had enough of this. It's always I've had this. Okay, all right. I also really do not like that, and I think this should speak to voters, that Hutchinson and Christie signed that pledge saying that they'll support whoever the nominee is. And yet, last night, they both said they would not support the nominee if it were Trump. So, did you lie to get into the debate? What made you change your mind from signing that pledge to last night? I think those are the major questions. Okay, I do have to take a short break. I'm going to talk about that maybe a little bit more here in just a little bit. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I wanted to remind you that on tomorrow's program, Bruce Whitmarsh will be our guest. He is with the Chemung County Historic Society. They have that big event coming up this weekend. Let me see if I have it on the screen. There you go. Celebrating its 100th anniversary. That's this Saturday from 1 to 5 p.m. at the Chemung Valley History Museum. You see the address right there. The event is free to the community, and all are invited to come and celebrate 100 years of collecting, preserving, and sharing our local history. So Bruce will be with us tomorrow morning. You may recall he was on the program before, so I really look forward to talking to him again. So again, Hutchinson and Christie both rule out supporting Trump if he's a Republican nominee. The problem I have with that is they had signed the pledge that said they would support whoever the nominee is. And that was one of the things that people pointed to why Trump wouldn't attend the debate, because he has said he couldn't support some of the people on that stage. That's the right tact. If you don't feel like you can support the nominee, then don't sign the pledge. But for Christie and Hutchinson to basically signal to voters right out of the gate that I'll do what is ever politically expedient for me. I'll do, without hiding it, whatever needs to be done to better myself. And that's kind of been Christie's history, political expediency. And again, I don't like that. Hold on. This is Christie. I've had enough already tonight of a guy who sounds like a chat GPT, whatever. But I've had enough already. Christie did this during the last election. Trump has to do this. He's got to do that. Yeah, and I don't know where that confidence, that arrogance comes from, but it's been kind of Chris Christie's MO, and some people gravitate towards it. So again, I want to put my contact information up because the sheriff's just about to come in the studio. So if you have any questions for Sheriff Jim Allard, or if you want to weigh in on the debate, who did you think last night's winner was? What did you think of the debate overall? Obviously, without former President Trump being there, which, by the way, when he shows up to court today, when he turns himself in, any talk of this debate is long gone. So if you have anything you want to say, you better say it now, because this will be very old news very quickly, as that surrender will be everywhere. I don't know if you flip through any of the channels, but some are carrying the coverage pretty much all day. So I would love to have you weigh in on the debate before it's no longer relevant when Trump makes his moves in Georgia today. So we've got to take a short break. The sheriff is here, so stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program, because we are being joined in the studio this morning by Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. Jim, thanks so much for being on the program.
It's always my pleasure to come see you, Frank.
I know. We've got so much to talk about. It's been a while.
It has.
So we'll have to catch up on the summer. But first, how was the fair? I've been asking everybody this. Seems like everybody was at the fair this year.
It was really good this year. We got lucky with the weather. As you know, usually it pours the entire week.
Yes.
And we got really lucky. They had a good turnout with the 4-H booths.
Yeah.
And I think I went a couple different days, and I talked to folks that went Friday and Saturday, and it sounds like it was well enjoyed.
Yeah.
So.
I went on Friday, and I had to call Joe Sempolinski because I was at the Republican booth, and he let me sign up for a time where there wasn't pig races. How could he?
How could he do that?
I called him up. I read him the riot act. The whole reason
pig races are like the attraction.
It is. It's crazy.
Everybody speaks about that. Everybody wants to see that.
I love it. But it's so much fun at the fair. So I thought I saw a booth there, and I saw Langworthy was there, and it was a nice event this year. So how was the summer? Oh, go ahead.
He actually walked around for close to 2 hours.
Well, there's enough to see. I could see that.
And he met with a lot of the 4-H kids. He got his picture taken with a lot of them. It was nice. It was very nice.
That's great. How's the summer been overall?
Summer's been busy.
Yeah.
It's been very busy.
I get the press releases.
Yeah. And, a lot of the stuff that we don't do press releases on is where we're assisting other agencies. And our SWAT team's been activated, I think, 3 times in the last month.
Oh, my goodness.
That crash up on 390, our deputies were they were using their EMT equipment and triaging. Again, we had 1 ambulance available for 13 people.
Wow.
and so they were instrumental in the EMS response to that crash. So they've been very, very busy.
And I want to talk more about kind of the negative side of things. But before that, just the other day, probably
we never talk about the negative.
I know, right? So, but maybe I should save this to the end on a positive note. But we had a great conversation on this program just a few weeks back with Georgia Verdier. How cool is that? And so rightfully deserved that she's in the Steuben County Hall of Fame now.
It was so overwhelming deserved. I mean, when you look at her resume,
it's amazing.
It's amazing, and in the little things that she does in keeping people, especially young people, involved in our community and keeping them as part of the focus of what we do. It's incredible, and I can't say enough good about Georgia. She's an awesome lady, and I was so happy to be able to be part of her being recognized at the Steuben County Hall of Fame. It was long overdue.
I think the best part is she had no idea.
Yeah.
She was telling us that, just that surprise phone call. I think that just makes it even more special, because I'm sure people in the past have maybe even nominated themselves or something like that. Here she is out of nowhere. Hey, by the way, you're going to be in the Hall of Fame. But when she was telling us about the NAACP and the scholarships that they offer, it's it's so remarkable how much work they put into it. And she's been president, I think she said 30-some years.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she was amazing during 2018, 2019, moving into 2020. I contribute a lot of the fact that we had a peaceful time through 2020 compared to some of our neighbors.
Very much so.
A lot of that I contribute to her leadership.
I totally agree. So now let's get to the bad stuff. Sheriff Jim Ballard is our guest. So we had Allison Hunt on the program yesterday, and we were talking about the confusion with the marijuana laws. And I don't think anybody really knows the answer to what in the world is going on.
So it's completely upside down. When you talk to folks from other states that created the infrastructure first, the governmental infrastructure first, and then passed laws, everything worked smoothly. We in New York, of course, did not do that. We passed laws with no infrastructure. We spent 2 years trying to determine what that infrastructure is going to look like, or even longer. And then they dabbled their toe in the water and then pulled it back and said, we're not going to do any more licenses. Meanwhile, all of these sticker shops, a lot of them got raided in other parts of the state. But then when they went to court, what they did was not upheld in court.
Okay.
They did warrantless seizures. And so their enforcement, the big enforcement arm, I've talked to sheriffs all over the state, and they would come in, do their seizure, and then never come back again.
No kidding.
And there's no follow-up enforcement. It's all about, it seems to be mainly media-driven. You get that big headline, and then we move on, and whatever happens, happens. But in the meantime, we've got all of this cannabis out there that's not regulated, that's not tested. We don't know how strong it is, and it's being sold, it's being gifted, whatever you want to call it. And there's really no enforcement. I was on a Zoom call with the Office of Cannabis Management, and I said, tell me what I need to do to help.
Yeah.
I'll stand out in front of a sticker shop, FaceTime you, walk in. What do you need me to do? What can I do to assist? Because, the candy simulated edibles in there, they look exactly like candy. Any kid's going to see that and think it's candy. Yeah. And we've got to address that before we have more issues. But the only response I can get is when we come down, we may talk to you. But we'll take care of it.
Well, we had one right next door. I've been no secret about this. That got cracked down. But I was amazed. You come in the morning with the wrappers that people had thrown out with edibles, and you would think it was a candy shop. Yeah. I mean, it looks. No wonder kids are having, because hasn't that been a major?
Willy Wonka.
It really does. Even stealing some of the logos and things.
Yeah.
Have you had an issue with a lot of kids accidentally getting?
We've had a couple of hospitalizations of kids that have gotten into their parents' edibles. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's one's too many.
Yes.
But. Come on, New York State.
I know. Well, that's the thing. And to your point of media-driven, so I happened to just watch the whole crackdown because I'm right here. And it's Corning, and the word spreads. And just that it's at noon.
Yes.
And they're basically blocked the street. I mean, it looked great.
Yeah.
It looked like I'm watching Chicago PD or something. But at the same time, we actually have to have laws in place. We have to, because you hear about in the city, they say there could be up to 4,000 of these places.
Oh, yeah.
And how many legal dispensaries do we even have in the state? Any?
So I think they issued like a dozen?
Yeah.
Maybe a dozen licenses. The closest ones to us are Ithaca and Binghamton.
Yeah. So, I mean, they could not have handled this more poorly. And
No.
think about what they promised us at the beginning, how many billions of dollars. We're not seeing anything.
Yeah, there's no tax revenue, as you know. Maybe there's some minor from the few licensees they have open, but they just hired 73 more investigators in the OCM for the statewide enforcement, 2 months ago, not to mention the folks that they've already hired.
Right.
None of that's free.
No.
And what little taxes they're getting in is already eaten up. There's no, and we knew that. I mean, we had that discussion before they passed it. No state has even realized a tenth of the financial revenue that they expected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So right from the beginning, and that's why, and we talked about it with Allison, it's a shame that some of these areas like Corning opted in so quickly, because once you opt in, you can't opt out.
You're in forever.
You're in forever. So it's really created a mess. We got to take a short break, though. Can you stay with us?
Yep.
All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. We're going to get right back into our M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program. Again, I don't want to keep quoting Allison Hunt, but we talked with her yesterday, and we seem to be covering the same topics. Homelessness seems to be on the rise, specifically in Corning, but throughout the area. Have you noticed problems with that?
Throughout the county,
Yeah.
it is. And, a lot of our motels are subsiding consistently on being reimbursed by DSS for homeless and homelessness, and a lot of that again goes back to the state with their code blue in the winter, code red in the summer,
Right.
where folks can't be turned down for assistance, and we see almost communities, instead of when you go out to LA or places like that,
Right.
you see tent communities of it.
Right.
Ours have overtaken many of our smaller hotels in the county.
I was shocked. I saw the numbers of where, they would show what hotels and like that. It's really prevalent.
Yes, it is.
And so have you seen troubles related to that?
Yes. So, again, our DSS investigators work with DSS to try and regulate as best they can.
Sure.
But we do checks, but what you have is folks couch surfing also within those. And so that they're moving through, and if someone has a disease, it's spread throughout that community, and if someone else is dealing or looking for places to crash or to hide or whatever, it's much easier. And the number of domestics we see,
I'm sure,
based on substance use, is quite high in those areas.
And that's what I want to mention, because it's not just with the homeless, but we've talked so often about opioid addiction and so many of the various addictions. Well, is there anything new on that? Is it getting worse? Is it getting better? The same?
Our overdoses continue to rise every year, and number of fatal. We just had a double fatal up in Caton that we responded to.
Oh my gosh!
Because there's another new drug on the scene. And I'm going to call it by its street name, because if I try to use the chemical name, I'm going to butcher it. But it's called Trank, and it is used in conjunction with an opiate, but it doesn't respond to Narcan. So the number of fatal overdoses continue to rise.
So how do you combat that if they keep coming up with new ways to combat something that saves lives?
Right.
It seems like every time you're on the program, I'm not making light of it, but there's something new on the street.
Correct. That's part of it is whatever is going to make the high last longer. That's what folks that are suffering from substance use disorder, that's what they're going to search for.
That's horrible. So I guess how do we combat this? I know we talked with Allison. You and I have talked about it in the past. Treatment's necessary.
Yep.
But how do some of these people get the treatment?
So we do. We started this a couple of years ago at the county, between the DA, District Attorney Baker, myself, and SCASIS, the Steuben Council on Alcohol and Substance Abuse Addiction. We do what's called a community impact panel. So first-time drug offenders, they have to come in and listen to us as part of their sentence, and we talk about consequences, effects we've seen in the community, and what we don't, and how it affects everyone in the community, not just them.
Right.
And then Julie Haar from SCASIS talks about the genetics and the science of addiction.
Oh, interesting.
And where you can go get help is where it finishes. It's not a
Yeah, right.
It's not a finger shaking. It's, look, this is what happens. And you might not mean for it to happen. And I tell all the horror stories of parents losing children and community members losing friends and family. And Julie gets right into the science of it. And you know, we hope that it's impacting some of those folks that come.
Right.
And I feel like we are. But education, treatment, and enforcement are always the three legs of that stool. So we're invested in all three legs.
Yeah, well, that's good, because it's just so troubling to see, because we've talked about it for so long, but when you see the numbers, it's really heartbreaking.
It is, and we do medically assisted treatment in the jail for opioid folks that are on addicted to opioids, and we're typically treating around 30 people a day.
Wow.
Right now.
Wow. That's amazing. Steuben County. I wanted to talk about the Clean Slate Act, but before that, and it kind of ties in together, I don't know if you saw the recent piece about Governor Hochul, and now she is, I can't quote the headline exactly, but she's concerned about public safety because it costs the Democrats the majority in the House. So not because she's worried about the public.
Not because people don't feel safe in their homes.
Yeah. And I find that, well, it's kind of politics 101, isn't it?
Yes.
But it's also very discouraging, because every poll shows that people are concerned about public safety. People are leaving the state because of public safety.
Yes.
And then every time we hear that Albany's in session, we get a Clean Slate Act, or we get whatever. So I was hoping you could fill us in a little bit on the Clean Slate Act. We talked with Phil a little bit about it.
Yeah. The Clean Slate Act is passed both the Senate and the Assembly. And to my knowledge, she hasn't signed it yet.
Not that I've heard of.
But what it does in a nutshell is, if you have a misdemeanor conviction of anything other than a sex offense, 3 years post your latest incarceration or probation, it gets suppressed. Okay. So if, say, and this is where it really concerns me, say I do a misdemeanor arson, which there is. Yeah. 4 years later, I go and want to join South Corning Fire Department, and they do the background check. It's not going to show. Oh, wow. Because it's a civil employment type search of records. I'll still be able to see it if you apply for a pistol permit or if you're arrested, but I can't give it to South Corning Fire Department and say, yeah, this guy's been convicted of arson. Probably hadn't ought to be a firefighter, right? Wow. Any kind of larceny, if you go to work at a bank, that's going to be suppressed. For felonies, it's 8 years past your latest incarceration or parole, and then that's automatically suppressed. Everything except for murder or a sex offense. Okay. So again, grand larceny, falsifying business records, providing a false written statement, all those things that are going to impact the financial industry, they won't be able to get it on a background check.
Well, and they say the business community supports this, but I know we've said it a million times, but businesses could hire these people before with it on the record. Right. So what we're saying in Albany is, let's trick people into hiring people, you know? It doesn't make any sense.
And where it hits us in public safety is most counties across the state have civilian dispatchers. The only carve-out for this is people that are applying for police and peace officer jobs. So in order to be compliant with the FBI and DCGS in order to search criminal justice records, part of that is a fingerprint application process where it's a criminal history check to make sure you're not convicted of any of these things before you're hired as a dispatcher, but there's no carve-out in the HALT Act, or the Clean Slate Act, the Clean Slate Act, to protect counties from hiring bad actors, previously bad actors, for dispatchers.
I just don't, what is the upside to this? And I think
the alleged reason is to prevent folks from having that stain on their record for employment. Okay. But again, so many things. For example, endangering the welfare of a child is not a sex offense. Right.
So there you go.
You harm a child. It's not a sex offense. It's going to be suppressed.
So you could be working in a daycare.
Yes.
That is unbelievable. But with all of this, we talk Clean Slate Act, bail reform. I forget some of the names. There's so many.
I know.
It kind of comes
HALT
up.
Act, that's what I deal with all the time.
Yeah. How much does this discourage you and your office when you see this?
Well, you see it discourage folks from taking jobs in criminal justice. Superintendent Negrelli presented at our summer conference, and just like all the rest of us, the state police, even as much as they pay, are struggling with recruitment.
Yeah.
We struggle with recruitment. We're down almost 20% in our jail for full-time correction officers.
Right.
It's good pay, good benefits,
Yeah.
but nobody wants to take the chance of being indicted.
No.
You know,
It's amazing.
on a whim. And it's much more dangerous in the jails now. Our inmate-on-inmate assaults have skyrocketed.
Sure.
Because there's no real way to discipline bad actions within the jail now after the HALT Act. So all of these things combine to make people go that might get into law enforcement go,
Yeah.
maybe I'll go somewhere else and do it.
Why would you? I mean, I hate to say that, obviously, but when the numbers that we're looking at, that we were talking about, when I get the press releases and even the things we're not aware of, how those aren't going away.
No.
And so when you don't have the people, what do you do?
So people are working a ton of overtime.
That's what I wonder.
And not voluntarily.
Yeah.
We have COs that we call it getting stuck.
Yeah.
Where, hey, you got to stay an extra 4.
Wow.
Just to cover a post. And then when you have something like, constant watches where someone is suicidal and they have to be watched 24/7.
Yeah.
Or someone's in a hospital from the jail, and that means 2 COs, 2 correction officers have to go up and monitor that individual. It kills staffing. I mean, it just crushes it.
Yeah.
So we continue to recruit, and we did get the county to pay a little bit more for what the correction officers are making.
Well, that's
but
good.
We're still down.
It's still not doing it, though.
Still down 14, 15 people.
Well, it's a stressful job already. So then you get stuck. You think about at the end of the workday, and you can't wait to get home, and then, hey, sorry,
you can't go home yet.
And it's a stressful job.
Yeah.
So it's horrible.
Yeah, I tell you, I gave huge kudos to all of our correction officers across the state, both state and local, for the job they're doing that no one else wants to do.
That's exactly it. And I think we're just about out of time, but yes, we are. But I do want to ask. We were a couple minutes ago, but that's okay. I had so much to ask you today. Have you had a lot of questions regarding the gun laws?
Yes.
Yeah, because I know Scope has been trying to do a good job of.
They have been.
They always do, though.
Yep.
So what are you finding? What are maybe the misconceptions, and how does this affect law-abiding gun owners?
A lot of the issue, again, with the state is that they passed that last slate of gun laws, and then the federal judge up in Syracuse put a stay on it.
Yeah.
And then another federal judge said, no, you can't do that. So then he put a second stay on it, and then they put a stay on the stay. and
I wish I had a chart.
Yeah, I know. It's like a weather map. And then there was supposed to be a 3-judge panel who went through it all and said, yes, this is constitutional. No, it's not. And to date, to my knowledge, that panel's never met.
Oh, that doesn't even matter.
So, no, not that I know of. So it still goes back to the original laws, which were no public place, no public property, all of that. There has been some issuances from the governor's office that we don't intend to enforce historical reenactments. We don't intend to enforce, but the law hasn't changed, and it hasn't been struck down.
And wouldn't that concern you? We don't intend to.
Right.
Well, when's that time when they change their mind?
Well,
you know, to make the headlines, to get the splash. I mean, you would hope not with the reenactments, but I don't know anymore with this thing.
And what came out initially was every VFW and American Legion that has a bar, they're like, well, we can't have our ceremonial rifles in our vault anymore.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, and we can't go to a public cemetery and do a salute for that veteran that's fallen. So, and that's where the governor's office has said, well, that's not the intent of the law. We don't want to prohibit that, but it's the way the law reads.
It is the law.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a theme on this morning's show, but you look at, like we were talking about with marijuana, you look at this, Albany seems so quick to rush something through, so it looks like they're doing something, and they act as if they care. Same with bail reform. But it has a complete opposite reaction. It's frustrating.
All of this police reform, and I know you got to go. But
no, that's okay.
What it's done, all it has done is force agencies to lower their hiring standards.
Yeah.
In order to get people in,
which is never.
And what it's done is made the public less safe across the board, and made it where we're having to manage folks that we might not have hired 10 years ago.
Wow.
And it does the opposite. Every one of these acts has done the opposite of what they tell you it's going to do.
100%. It's a recipe for disaster.
It is.
I mean, and you add all these things up, and then you wonder why people are leaving in droves. I hate to say it. I say on the program, I love the state. It's a beautiful area, but you can't blame somebody when they say, if you fear for your safety or your family's safety, I mean, that's government's #1 job.
Right.
And they're doing the opposite.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
If you're not hitting safety and security, you can't achieve anything else.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. Well, I'm glad we ended on a happy note.
Yeah, we always do.
We always do. Well, thanks for giving us so much time this morning. We'll have to do it again because I still had stuff to cover. So, all right, we'll do it soon. No worries. All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Just having a nice chat with the sheriff. I always love having the sheriff on the program. So much to cover. So many discouraging things to cover. But it's necessary, right? So there we go. All right. You got a little behind the scenes. I knew that it was going to come back early, just so you know. I wasn't just talking. The microphone takes a minute to come back on because of a break situation. So you got to see behind the scenes of Frankly Speaking for just a moment. Let's go back to the debate. By the way, we got a virtual wave. I appreciate that. It's been quiet on the street here. But weigh in. Who do you think won last night, or what did you think of the debate? Many are saying it was... they use that as, Trump's not there and he can, and I think this is fair to say, kind of take the oxygen out of the room. He's very good at controlling the conversation, we'll put it that way. Without him there, it was interesting to see some of the candidates make their case. But you've got to believe right now that Ramaswamy is really after Trump, the front runner, because Trump's so far in the polls. Most want to say it's DeSantis, but everybody had the long knives out last night for Ramaswamy. So there's some nervousness there. And, of course, this morning there's quite a few pieces attacking him, calling him a smart aleck, or kind of who was it? Jill Filipovich, I think, from CNN, who said he embodied the worst of millennials with none of the millennial beliefs. I don't agree with that. Well, yeah, maybe not the millennial beliefs, which is, I think, a good thing. I don't know if it was coming off arrogant. I thought Christie did. There was times that Mike Pence, I thought, came off condescending. But when Christie said, hold on, I've had enough already tonight of a guy who sounds like Chat GPT. So that was a can line. Again, I don't want to keep belaboring this, but when he says, I've had enough already tonight. Well, okay, Chris. Then he said, the last person in one of these debates, Brett, who stood in the middle of the stage and said, what's a skinny guy with an odd last name doing up here, was Barack Obama. And I'm afraid we're dealing with that same type of amateur. So trying to say Ramaswamy is, I guess, Barack Obama-esque, meaning to scare Republicans into thinking it would be another term of Obama, I suppose. But Ramaswamy is getting a lot of praise this morning for his discussion or his talking point of the fatherless epidemic. He said the word privilege gets used a lot. Well, you know what? I did have the ultimate privilege of 2 parents in the house with a focus on educational achievement, and I want every kid to enjoy that. So part of the problem is we also have a federal government that pays single women more not to have a man in the house than to have a man in the house, contributing to an epidemic of fatherlessness. And I think that goes hand in glove with the education crisis as well, because we have to remember education starts with the family, and the nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. And he's used that line in the past, but I think it's very powerful. He used it in his 10 Commandments. We've got to take a break. But I think it's a very powerful line, and it was received a lot of praise. It even received praise from, I guess, on paper anyway, one of his opponents, and that's Larry Elder. Larry Elder is running for president. He did not make the debate last night because of, I don't know if it was polling numbers or donations or whatever, but he praised Ramaswamy for that. So we're going to go quickly through, after I take this break, through what some of what some other people had to say, what some pundits had to say. You still have plenty of time to weigh in, because to me, the most important pundit, the person that has the most knowledge on this, is you. So contact me, because some of these people, it's back and forth. I mean, Liz Peek was saying Ramaswamy is going to knock this out of the park, and now she's saying, I don't know if I like him all that much. So that's not what we want. We want to hear from you. But I will tell you what some pundits had to say here. Just a little bit, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you again for joining us here on Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. So the New York Post says that it was refreshing and lively, and it was a debate over issues that actually affect you and I. They said that Ramaswamy was the biggest bomb thrower and the biggest target. One of the things that people said were kind of off-putting about him, and we're giving all sides to this, because some of the things he said I really, really liked. But he said, or some are calling him a smart aleck. I don't know. Is that how he came off to you? According to Drudge, before I went on the air this morning, the poll that they do after every debate, he was leading in the debate performance last night. Pence and Haley discussed abortion. You had Trump defenders versus Trump critics. Again, Hutchinson and Christie saying that they would not support Trump if he's the nominee. They both got booed, I believe. I know Christie got booed at some point. I believe they both got booed. Now let's go to outlets. Not all. Let me rephrase that. Let's go to one outlet that does not want to see the Republican win no matter what. So I always find it interesting when they give us our takeaways, and that's CNN. They did mention that Ramaswamy took shots all night, that people went after him. But what that tells me is that Ramaswamy is really the number two. DeSantis didn't really stand out according to them. And I would say there's maybe a point there. He definitely had some really good, well, he had kind of a tried and true method of things on how to go after certain issues, kind of very much like a stump speech. They also suggest that Christie failed when it came to being the attack dog. Christie seemed ready to give Ramaswamy that kind of treatment, that attack dog treatment. But I think Ramaswamy scored big on this. So he said to Chris Christie, "Your claim that Donald Trump is motivated by vengeance and grievance would be a lot more credible if your entire campaign was not based in vengeance and grievance against one man." And I thought that encompassed what we're seeing from Christie perfectly. I just thought that was a great line from Ramaswamy. And I'm not, again, I can understand a little bit of that negative coverage of Ramaswamy with kind of, and I think a lot of it is people see him, he's 38 years old, and they say, why is he lecturing a Pence? Because Pence looks like a statesman. He's got that very political look. So I understand that to an extent, but I don't think it's as bad as what like a Joe Filipovich is saying, that he encompasses the worst of what millennials are perceived as. I didn't see that either. I saw a man up there that was trying to give his response to people that he deemed politicians, essentially career politicians. So when we come back from our break, we're going to tell you what some people at Fox News had to say. We also have a couple things from the New York Post. We're going to run through it quickly. We've got 2 breaks we have to take before the end of the program. But again, I want to hear from you. So please weigh in. The numbers on the bottom of the screen. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking, and we're going to jump right into it because we received quite a few really great comments, hearing your take on it. Here's one from a viewer. Debate? ? Shouting match. Impossible to hear what they were saying. Good point. This was not a service to the electorate. Nikki Haley, big winner. Now that echoes what I've heard from various outlets on both sides, that Nikki Haley was the big winner last night. And then the other comment that we received, a couple here. I agree, Ramaswamy was the best. Just watching highlights now. Okay, understand. It's late night. It was a great time to highlight Ramaswamy without Trump in the debate. That's a fair point, too. I think it was really, I don't know if it was completely hit, this benchmark, but it was a good time to highlight all the candidates without the former president there, to give them all an opportunity. Because Trump does, I mean, I'm not saying anything that people don't know. He's very good at taking the oxygen out of the room and making it about him and getting his points in. That's not a negative. It's just in this scenario, well, it maybe is negative if you don't like him, or if you want to hear from the other candidates. But in this scenario, I thought it was a good opportunity for each of the candidates. Let's go to Fox News. And Mary Catherine Ham had this to say. She believes that under scrutiny will be Ron DeSantis. DeSantis did have the most striking moment when he said at that one point, where they're saying, raise your hand for this, raise your hand for that. And he said, we are not school children, before launching into his experience being on the ground dealing with natural disasters, because this one was specifically raise your hand about global warming. The pivot would preview DeSantis' strategy throughout the debate. Paraphrased, it goes something like this. Give me a topic, any topic. Yeah, I did that thing. Let me tell you what I did. It happened in Florida, and then his results. Some people have said he won. Others have said it's not going to move him in the polls. Now, Ramaswamy said he was quick. This is, again, Mary Catherine Ham saying, quick on his feet and thriving in the attention economy. Okay, the 38-year-old entrepreneur was rising in the polls coming to the stage. His opponents responded accordingly. Knowing that, they didn't like it. They went after him, making him the target of many attacks. And she said a lot of those attacks landed. She said even Pence got a good burn in when Ramaswamy delivered a canned line about canned lines, and the former Veep asked, is that one of yours? So this is what surprised me about this piece of Fox. Chris Christie, again, I thought he came off looking very arrogant, but she said, a skilled debater. I'm putting Christie in the top tier of these debate results because he drove parts of the debate, opened attack lines that other candidates piled on, and was the strongest on stage when going after Trump, who is, after all, everyone's competition. If you can't prosecute the case against the frontrunner, how do you win? Underestimated, she said, Mike Pence. Nikki Haley, she didn't seem to have much to say about that. Did well, but did not dominate the conversation. We got to take one last short break, and then we're going to wrap things up here on Frankly Speaking. It's going to go fast, so stay with us. All right, we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. So Liz Peek, who yesterday or the day before was championing Ramaswamy, she said of last night that all that momentum he had going in to Milwaukee, in just 2 hours, he blew that advantage, and most probably any chance he might have had in securing the nomination. He appeared smart-alecky and disrespectful of his fellow contestants. He interrupted constantly and displayed none of the sobriety and substance so needed by a 38-year-old eager to convince voters he belongs in the Oval Office. I think, if I'm being honest, a lot of that has to do, a lot of the negative coverage of him has to do with the fact that he's 38. There's always that talk of getting younger people involved in politics until it actually happens. And I think that's maybe a scenario. 38, they'll say, well, everybody running for office is too old. But then when someone who's younger steps in, they say, well, he looked like a millennial. He looked like a smart aleck. I just find that very kind of fascinating. Young people need to get involved. By the way, I love the fact that we're talking about this. I think we're doing great in-depth coverage. And as soon as Donald Trump turns himself in, any talk of the debate is no longer relevant. Will not be mentioned. It's kind of a weird time in history, isn't it? According to the New York Post's Isaac Score, there we go. We got a not virtual wave. According to Isaac Score, DeSantis was the winner. Your thoughts on that? It's really, I think, the only person that I saw in all my coverage this morning that I went through that actually, I didn't see a lot of people talk bad about DeSantis, but I didn't see anybody say that he was a clear winner. DeSantis was winner of the first debate, and he is the man best suited to unseat Trump. Judging from Wednesday night, DeSantis alone appears to have the stuff to beat Trump. It may remain an uphill battle, but by beginning the climb, he may have the man at the top of the mountain second-guessing his decision not to do the debate last night. Various pundits, we are out of time. Boy, that went fast. I'm sorry, folks. I wish we had more time. So many more things to comment about the debate last night. But tomorrow, we're going to have a busy, busy morning if Trump turns himself in today. Thank you again to Jim Allard, Sheriff Allard from Steuben County. Really appreciate him being on the program. Tomorrow, Bruce Whitmarsh from the Chemung County Historic Society. So make sure you tune in starting at 7 for Frankly Speaking, right here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.